Hi, welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And this is Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder. And today's episode is brought to us by Sarah's Chill. Their Shield Maiden nipple guards help parents overcome obstacles with latching, soreness, and flat or inverted nipples. And today's episode is also brought to you by Fairhaven Health. If you leak breast milk, you can now stop losing it to your breast pad and instead collect it to add to your stash. We will hear more from our sponsors later, but you can head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com and check out our sponsor page. See if you can give them any of your business because they make this podcast possible. And while you're there, scroll down and enter your email address and we'll send episodes straight to your inbox every week. And we are on Patreon, and we hope that you will join us there because we're having a ball with all of our fun extra things, and it allows us to have more contact with the people of this community. And a shout out to Rudy G and Ashley H for joining us over there. And we are still, for Patreon, you can head to the top link in the show notes under this episode. Wherever you're listening from, it's probably like see more or something. If you're in iTunes or Spotify or whatever, scroll down, find the see more, you'll see show notes and it'll be the top link. You just click it, look at the different tiers of offerings that we have and pick your favorite. And we are still hosting our ongoing giveaway for people who leave reviews around the internet. Send us a screenshot of your review, stars, whatever it is, and we will send you a goodie bag of stickers and nursing in public cards. You could send that to badassbreastfeedingpodcast@gmail.com and include your mailing address, please. And Dianne, I think, has our review of the week. I always say that like I don't know what's going to happen next.
I know. I do. And I always say that too. Like, I don't know that I have it. This is a short but sweet one. This is Dianne and Abby are great. As an experienced mom, it's nice to hear moms I can relate to. I've been breastfeeding for 11 years and and even I can learn new tips with this podcast. I would love to know what the hell we're teaching her because I think she could probably do this podcast without a problem.
Teach us something. Yeah.
She could absolutely teach us something. She's been breastfeeding for 11 years. So that is amazing. And thank you so much for
I would love to hear that story.
Out.
If you can send us, if you're interested in sending us your story, I would love to read it and maybe put it on social media or read it here. 11 years. How many kids is that? We don't know.
I know.
Could be a bunch.
I would love to know.
A couple. Yeah.
Yeah. Send it to us. We'll put it up.
Yeah.
If you're listening, hopefully you're listening.
And like your like top tips or like things you've learned.
That's awesome.
I would love to know that.
I know. Maybe she can talk to us about hunger cues.
Yeah. Tell us what those are because I still don't know.
Even though we're going to do a podcast about it today. But, you know.
Well, yeah. I don't know anything about this topic. Listen to me. But I always found that, are we ready to go? Are we ready to go in? Do you have anything else?
Yeah, no,
okay.
We're definitely ready to go in.
Okay. I always found that to be like just very confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the time we just don't know what our baby wants. We're like, what the hell is wrong with you?
And the only way they communicate with us is by crying, right? Like they cry, which communicates to us. And cues are, people always ask, like, what are hunger cues? And as like being a lactation consultant for so many years, this is one of the things we teach is the hunger cues, because there are very specific hunger cues, but those same cues mean other things too.
Yeah.
So it's very confusing. It is not a clear cut, like if your baby's doing this, that means they're hungry. Like it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
At least I've never found it to work like that with most babies. I mean, babies are all different, but it's very confusing.
Yeah. And this actually came to us from somebody sent a message over Instagram asking us to do an episode on this. And I can read it.
Yeah, read it.
Yeah, it's from Elizabeth. She says, can you talk more about hunger cues versus gastro issues? I found out my baby was overeating due to an oversupply that occurred from initially breastfeeding and pumping every 2 hours, my biggest regret. They told me to look for feeding cues, but she has feeding cues 24/7, so it's hard to know when she's hungry. She has a tongue revision, so she's always taking her tongue out. She was eating about 5 to 6 ounces every 2 to 2.5 hours, and she's 8 weeks old. So we bought a scale to measure it until we figured out when our baby is full. Oh, until we figure out when our baby is full. I mean, yeah, that's a really confusing situation to be told that, like,
watch for hunger
cues.
Yeah.
You watch for hunger cues because the baby's overeating. Okay, but then they just act hungry all the time. But then you're trying to not overfeed.
Yeah. And when I say they, I don't know who I'm talking about. Maybe like they always say, but like people will say like, oh yeah, watch for hunger cues. Like, well, what are they?
Like if it's so easy. Yeah.
Right. Well, what are those cues? Because the baby does everything, all the things. And sometimes I think we overthink this too, because we live in an age right now where like there's way too much information. It's information overload. You can find anything that you want, tenfold on the internet.
We have an oversupply of information.
We do. And it's just causes a lot of anxiety. And now, this poor mom is, weighing her baby all the time and really trying to figure out like what are we doing? Because I can't figure out what my baby needs. And I mean, for people that say breastfed babies don't overeat, some do. And that is because, it's very comforting to eat. Mom has an oversupply. It is very comforting for them. It is very soothing. They want to be on the breast all the time, and they're getting milk that they don't necessarily need, or they're being flooded with milk that they don't necessarily need if there is an oversupply. And I honestly, like I was saying this, I was in Babies and Bumps in Buffalo last week and was talking about this in my seminar that, I mean, babies they just do all the things, right? Like, and we don't know. Sometimes it's really hard to tell. Sometimes those cues can be really, really hard to determine what it is that they're doing.
Yeah.
And babies don't necessarily tell us very clearly sometimes. And I see oversupply more than I don't have enough milk. Honestly, like if we're being honest about it, oversupply is more of an issue because people are crazy about pumping right now. So this is not the situation that Elizabeth is talking about is not uncommon at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, babies do get uncomfortable when they eat too much, just like we do. And now we got gastro issues. I mean,
sometimes people message with like just insane amounts of milk. They're like, I used to get like 12 ounces when I pumped and now I'm getting 8. I'm like, that, what? No, that's too much milk.
It is a lot of milk, and babies don't need that much milk.
No.
An 8-week-old does not need 5 to 6 ounces every 2 hours. But if she's showing signs to nurse, and when they're that young, they'll always go on, right? Like they'll always go on the breast.
Totally. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's comforting, especially if you're not feeling good from being overfed.
Well, yeah. And then we always say like comfort nurse. You should totally comfort nurse. You should comfort nurse all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Just breastfeed on demand.
And that can be hard for a baby that's overeating.
Right. So then what do we do?
Yeah. So look at your baby as an individual. One of the things that I heard from a family not too long ago, which I thought was great, was their baby was putting their hands in their mouth all the time. And the mom said, I know that's a feeding cue. My baby does it all the time. So I'm really learning to know that when they do that, that doesn't always mean they need to eat. And a lot of this comes with learning your baby. So sometimes we just need to take a step back and stop reading all the things and stop looking at all the things and just look at our baby and really learn what our baby is doing. And I know that's like so easy for me to say because I already know, but sometimes it's just really hard because our babies are so individual and the things that we're reading are very like not individualized. So we really have to like look at what our baby's doing.
Yeah.
Kind of like,
yeah. I mean, if you have more than one baby, you know this to be true because they're probably very different.
Yeah. But because this is going to be an episode on hunger cues, we are going to talk about them. So, but the things that I do want people to know is that I found this really a pretty good article on it or a pretty good blog on it. And this is somebody that actually has a book about baby cues. So I'm like, oh, well, this is kind of cool. Because they talk about all the cues and what they mean and why sometimes they're not necessarily feeding cues. So one of the first things it says here is widely taught hunger cues. The common cues that parents are taught to look for to denote hunger are, and then there's this whole list of things. Baby roots to suck, places fingers in their mouth and sucks, opening and closing of mouth, smacking and licking of lips, moves her head from side to side, turns toward the breast while they're being held, squirming around a lot, become fussy, crying and screaming. Now, I will say these are the majority of like feeding cues, but there's definitely
baby
situations.
behaviors.
Exactly. And that's what this is going to go into.
That's what their day is. If there was like describe your day.
That's what their day is.
They're like smacking my lips, licking my lips, crying, turning my head. I mean, like, you pick up a baby. You don't even have to be or brush up against a baby's cheek. They're going to turn towards it.
And this is what I usually try to tell people, like the baby roots to suck, the rooting reflex, that is a reflex. And yes, it is there for survival for infants so that they're looking for the breast and they're trying to find the breast. But what do we know about reflexes is that something is going to stimulate that reflex. And what stimulates that rooting reflex is if something touches their cheek. So you could have a baby completely, totally fed and you swaddle them back up in their blanket and that blanket touches the side of their cheek and they're going to root towards it. Or you're holding them and your shirt touches the side of their face and they root towards it. I mean, but this is stuff people don't know, right? Because you have like Grandma Moses who's holding your baby and her shirt or her sweater or whatever touches the baby's cheek and the baby roots towards the breast and the grandma's like, oh, I don't have any milk. You better go to your mother. Your baby's hungry. The baby's hungry. And it's like, no, this isn't necessarily what's happening. The baby the suck reflex or the rooting reflex was stimulated. That's all. Doesn't mean the baby's hungry.
Yeah.
But do you want to freak people out? That's a fun party game to do right there. Let everybody hold your baby and see how many people are going to freak out that the baby's trying to latch onto them. Your baby's not trying to latch onto random people. Right. This is just the reflex.
It'd be like a drinking game. Every time the baby turns their head, take a shot.
Everybody will be freaking whooped by the end of the party. Places fingers in their mouth and sucks. I mean, that is just something that all babies do. And one of the things that I try to tell people when I'm talking about hunger cues, like in a class or something, I'll be like, do you have ultrasound pictures of your baby with their hands in their mouth?
I was just going to say that. They do that in utero. Yeah.
Yeah. And most of them will be like, oh, yeah, I do. I'm like, then that's probably not going to be a feeding cue. That's a comfort thing that babies do. Babies like to suck. So, and it's very comforting. It's very soothing. We know that. So if they're sucking on their fingers after they ate, that might not necessarily be a hunger cue because it's something that they're just doing. So one of the things, going back to the baby roots to suck, what it says here, it says rooting to suck is a cue that your baby wants to suck, not eat. It's a cue for sucking only, and our babies want to suck for many reasons, like when they feel uncomfortable anywhere in their body, they're teething, tiredness, revving up for a bowel movement, trapped, they need to burp. While their roots to suck reflex is beneficial for feeding and for them finding their way to food, it is also about enabling comfort for them. It is their natural method of self-soothing. So we can't always say, like, if your baby's rooting, that means that they're going to need to eat, because it doesn't necessarily mean that. Their fingers in their mouth, same thing. All newborns suck their hands in the womb. This is one of their innate reflexes that helps them to self-soothe and potentially ease the discomfort in their gums if they're teething, and their digestive system if that's sore, to help them nod off to sleep if they're tired. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are hungry. And we know that babies like to suck. We do know that. So once you know, and this is sometimes we have to think about the situation. Like if your baby has just slept for a couple hours, it's been 2 or 3 hours since they ate, they're waking up from a nap, their hands are in their mouth. Okay, that's probably a feeding cue because it's been a couple of hours, right? So that's probably as a feeding cue for your baby. They're probably ready to go. But if you've just fed your baby and they're doing that, that doesn't necessarily mean they're ready to eat again. It could mean that they're trying to go back to sleep now.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't trust that our body is feeding our baby correctly. So we always look at it as my baby's still hungry, or somebody else is looking at it as our baby's still hungry, even though these random people don't know our baby the way we do. But that's the people that we listen to.
Yeah. People always think a baby is hungry.
Yeah.
I remember being on the phone. I was on the phone with a friend when Jack was a baby, and he like started fussing or whatever. And she's like, "Oh, he sounds hungry."
Sounds hungry.
I'm like, what? Well, I was I'm like, shut up. What do you mean? Just like, it's just a thing to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. People are always like, oh yeah, the baby's hungry. If the baby is fussy even a little bit, or if they're doing anything, oh, the baby must be hungry.
Yeah, he's hungry.
And then that kind of leads us to not trust our own body and how it can supply milk for our baby.
And really what it should do is teach you to not trust other people.
Yeah.
Which is a super healthy way to go through life.
Oh, I know, right?
Just trust no one.
Yeah, I learned that at a young age. Yeah. Should we take a break?
We should.
Yeah. And then we're going to go back to these feeding cues.
We'll go back to hunger cues after we hear from our wicked sponsors. We'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Sarah's Chill, a company that never stops making the lives of breastfeeding parents easier. Created by a mom for moms, they know the challenges that this journey can bring. That's why they're committed to creating solutions that help families overcome hurdles and reach their breastfeeding goals. Their Shield Maiden nipple guards help parents overcome obstacles with latching, soreness, and flat or inverted nipples. Each Shield Maiden is made of laboratory-tested food-grade silicone that is velvety, skin-textured on the side used by your nursing baby, and smooth on the mama side so it adheres well. But the best part is they change colors. The shields are a vibrant color at room temperature, so you can easily find them when you need them, and clear at body temperature to give you a more natural experience. Revolutionary mom tech is the coolest. Whether it's a game-changing breast chiller, an epic freezer storage system, or color-changing nipple shields, the company has everything you need and want. Sarah's Chill is truly breastfeeding reimagined. Head over to Sarah's Chill. That's CERESCHILL.com and check out the magic sizing kit to find your perfect fit. Use code BADASS for 15% off your purchase. You can also follow them on Instagram at Sarah's Chill. And today's episode is also brought to you by Fairhaven Health. Have you ever thought about how much breast milk you are soaking up into your breast pads and throwing away? What if you could catch that milk and add it to your stash instead? The Milky's Milk Saver allows you to do just that. Slide the Milk Saver into your bra or tank top on the non-nursing side to catch the letdown while you breastfeed. People are adding ounces upon ounces to their stash on a daily basis. Thousands and thousands of breastfeeders have discovered this product. It holds 2 ounces of milk. It's comfortable to wear and reusable. You might think you're not leaking very much. That is what most people say before they've actually used the Milk Saver. You'll be shocked at how much milk you collect and at how much liquid gold you were throwing into the garbage. This milk can be used to beef up your stash, to make breast milk keepsakes, for baths, for breast milk popsicles, lotions, soaps, you name it. Breast milk is worth saving. Check out the Milky's Milk Saver at fairhavenhealth.com. That's FAIRHAVEN health.com, and use code BADASS for 15% off your purchase. And all of our sponsors today can be found in the show notes under this episode, wherever you're listening from. And you can also head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com and check our sponsor page, where you will also find our resources and all of our other episodes, over 300, and information about scheduling your very own one-on-one online lactation consultation with Dianne. Okay. Now let's get back to hunger cues.
Yes. So opening and closing of mouth. Newborns open and close their mouth for many things, especially if we stimulate around the reflex area of their mouth. So that is not unusual. But again, it is something that we teach as a hunger cue, that we're like, okay, if they're kind of opening their mouth, they're licking their lips a little bit, that could be a hunger cue, but it could also mean other things. Same with smacking and licking the lips, could mean other things. So one of the things, and I don't know, you'd have to actually, I'm going to link this in the show notes, but this article in the show notes, but this person also has cues about like burping and stuff like that. So she's saying that when a baby has trapped air sitting high in the stomach and or esophagus ready for release, they show like the cue of chewing, poking their tongue out. And that is mistaught as a hunger cue, but it really means that they need to be burped, which I'd never heard of before. But I think that's kind of interesting that's, so maybe if your baby has just fed and they're showing this cue, maybe try to burp them instead and see if that helps. Because maybe they just need
that
to
makes
burp.
sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Moving their head from side to side. This happens when your baby's reflex area around their mouth and cheeks are touched. It also is also exhibited when some of the burping cues are present, along with it being naturally compatible of newborns as they begin to visually explore their new world. So you might just see that your baby's kind of like looking around, moving their head from side to side. And of course, if they're doing all these cues together, not if they're doing all these cues together, you might see your baby doing these cues together. You might see them moving their head from side to side and smacking their lips at the same time. So you go, oh my gosh, the baby's starving. That isn't necessarily what's going on. They could be trying to tell you all these different things. Turns toward the breast chest while being held. Again, this occurs because the reflex area on the face is being stimulated. And if it's the mother holding the baby, they can smell the milk. So they may turn toward it, but doesn't necessarily mean that they're hungry. Again, if it's been a while since your baby has eaten, then we know that that's probably a hunger cue, right? If it's been a couple of hours, even if it's been an hour and a half, that could definitely be a hunger cue. But if their baby is doing any of these things right after they eat, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a hunger cue.
Well, it's the same
Squirming.
thing. Oh, sorry.
Go.
It's the same thing that we talk about with like bottle feeding, because babies are continuing to act like babies after they eat. And so then we're like, oh my God, they're still hungry because they're still doing all of these hunger cues. So let me give them a bottle. Oh my God, they ate the whole bottle. But a lot of that stuff is just, it's involuntary.
Right.
They don't have control over it. Yeah, right. They're just doing it because their body is doing it. It's not in like reaction to something that's happening within their body, like hunger.
And you know what? We might have to do it. I know a long time ago, I think anyway, maybe I'm just making it up. We did an episode about how bottle feeding is actually not easier for babies. And I hear that all the time. People, in fact, I had a client that said that to me just yesterday. She texted me because the baby's struggling at the breast. And she's like, but he'll go take the bottle because it's easier. No, it's not. It's actually not easier. And that is such a misconception that bottles are easier for babies. Just because they take it does not mean it's easier for them. And maybe we should maybe do
It just
another
means it's
episode
in their
about that
mouth.
again. Yeah, that's all it means. But physiologically, it's more difficult for them to do.
Yeah.
So, but it's reflexive for them to suck on a bottle. So if we put the bottle in their mouth and we leave it there, then they're going to suck that bottle down. But what I do find interesting is that all babies do these cues, all of them. But if you're bottle feeding and you gave your baby a bottle and they're doing these cues, we don't go, oh, they're hungry. Right? Like, because we know we just gave them a bottle.
Yeah.
So we can
see with our eyeballs exactly how much they ate.
Right. So it's really only like we just don't trust the breastfeeding. That's really what it comes down to when it comes to these cues, is that we're not trusting that our baby is eating enough. And then in a situation like Elizabeth, her baby was eating too much. So now what do? Now you follow the feeding cues. Well, how do I know what the feeding cues are? We have to really watch our baby, and just really trust the fact that we know her baby's getting milk. We know she is. So these cues that she's doing after eating, I'm saying she, I don't even know if it's a boy or a girl. The cues that the baby's doing after they're eating are not feeding cues. She's just cueing for other things. That's all. So what I love here is, and this goes back to watching our baby. So, well, let me finish up with squirming around. I'm jumping around here. I'm sorry. Squirming around a lot. Sorry to sound repetitive here, but again, babies squirm for many reasons, with one of the most common being movement of food, gas, waste in the digestive system. They will also squirm when they're hungry, yes, but it doesn't always denote hunger. Become fussy, crying and screaming. You guessed it. These can be cues for many things too, like cramping or an overabundance of gas, lactose, fat in the digestive tract, too much food, not enough food, bowel motions, and pain anywhere in the body. Being fussy or crying can also be a sign that baby is tired. So again, if your baby is due for a feed, it's been a couple of hours and we're seeing the crying, then we always say crying is the final hunger cue. It's the last hunger cue. It's like you've missed all the other cues. When they're crying, that means they're hungry.
Yeah.
The only time, what I tell people is, the only time you will probably ever see that as a hunger cue is if everybody's asleep in the middle of the night and that's how your baby wakes you up. During the day when you're with your baby, you're not going to reach to the point where they're crying for hunger because you're with your baby. You know that they need to eat. You're watching them. You're seeing their cues. They're with you all the time. That's at night when they're waking you up.
And when they're fussing, that's just one of the things you try.
Right.
You're like, oh, they're fussy. It's like the first thing you try.
Right.
Oh, let me try nursing you. Let me latch you on. And then if they don't, if they continue squirming, then you go to all the other things.
Exactly. But just because they're crying, like if they're crying after a feeding or they're just crying randomly between a feeding, that doesn't necessarily mean they're hungry. But everybody always goes, oh, your baby's crying, they must be hungry. Not necessarily. That does not mean hunger. Crying is the last cue for hunger. So how can you be confident that your baby is having enough to eat, that they're crying, rooting to suck, shorter sleep cycles are not about hunger? So this is where we get into the meat of it here. How to tell if a baby is hungry. To be truly baby led and take the pressure off parents to get the cues right, it's time to change our rationale and base our decision on the firm foundation of digestive biology and its development, along with watching how a baby is feeding to diagnose if they are hungry or not. By do this, we embrace an approach that is genuinely, holistically, and legitimately baby led, rather than perception led as all the cues above are. So here are the 4 things I watch to ascertain whether a baby's symptoms are from hunger or digestive overload. For the baby, the suck-swallow ratio when breastfeeding. Amounts when bottle feeding are conducive to a healthy growth for their age, which means you're pace bottle feeding, which means you're not overfeeding by bottle. Number of wet and dirty diapers during a day, and weight gain. But we tend to not look at any of those things. And those are the things that really tell us if our baby is doing okay. And I rarely find families that really know how to watch a baby's feeding, like their suck swallow ratio. And what we say by suck swallow, what we mean by suck swallow ratio is that if your baby is sucking and swallowing, so if you have your baby on the breast and they're like suck, swallow, suck, swallow, suck, swallow, maybe 2 sucks and a swallow, and they're doing that consistently throughout the feeding, they're eating. And we know that they're moving milk, they're eating, they're moving milk. Just sucking does not mean that they're eating. And this is where parents, I think, get really confused. And this is why seeing a lactation consultant is really important, because they can show you how to watch for these things. I've had many families who are like, oh, that's not feeding? I thought because the baby was sucking that they're getting milk. No, that doesn't mean they're getting milk. Mm-hmm. If they're randomly swallowing, that doesn't mean that they're actually transferring milk well. So this is important to know to make sure your baby's getting milk. This isn't just like, oh, this is, something fun so you can watch your baby. This is important to know so you know your baby's getting milk. They should be feeding like suck, swallow, couple sucks and a swallow. Maybe they'll pause for a minute and then kind of get right back into that again. Once they get to the point where they are doing like several sucks but no swallow, or several sucks and then a random swallow, then we know, okay, they're not feeding anymore. That is them just kind of suckling for comfort, which is fine. All babies do that towards the end of a feeding, but it is important for you to know the difference. Newborns fall asleep really easily at the breast. Like newborns to the first couple weeks of life fall asleep pretty easily at the breast. So you should be watching what they're doing instead of watching what a clock says that they're doing. Mm-hmm. So all of these, I know everybody's got the app that, because I'll be like in the middle of a consult with somebody and they'll be like, oh my God, I forgot to click the button on the app to show that I'm feeding right now. Or what time did we start? I need to know what time we started. I wasn't looking at my watch. I hear that all the time because we're constantly worried about the timing. Time doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't tell us anything. What watching our baby does. So it is really important to know that your baby is getting what they need, and watching that suck ratio is a really important way to do that. It says, newborns that are coping with an overabundant supply or a fast flow can have a very different suck-swallow ratio, staying between 1 to 1 and 3 to 1 throughout the entire feed, which means they'll fill their tummies faster and won't need as long on the breast to feel full. So do get to know your baby's suck-swallow ratio and know that it can change throughout their ages as they become more efficient and your hormones also change. So this is a really important point. You should really kind of learn, and this is what we mean by you're getting to know your baby. You get to know your baby really well when you're breastfeeding because you are really in tune with them. So in the beginning, it can feel really confusing, but as you're going along, you're going to know a little bit better what your baby is doing. So if you're putting your baby on the breast, just every single time you're seeing what you think is a feeding cue, I can guarantee you they're not eating every single time they go on there. They're just kind of doing some suckles, some pausing, the little suckling. That doesn't mean they're eating. That just means that they're comfort nursing, which is fine. But if you do have an oversupply of milk and that milk is just flowing at them constantly, then they're going to be overfed. So amounts when bottle feeding. Nature's biology has our newborns and infants being birthed with stomachs that are around a certain size at each age. Knowing that you are feeding to these amounts in accordance with their digestive function, so every 3.5 to 4 hours for those amounts to be broken down and absorbed in a healthy manner, gives you certainty that baby is not feeling hungry. So bottle feeding tends to go slower. When I say slower, I mean there's longer time between feeds, I feel like. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I really feel and I'm just saying this just from not my own experience, since my babies were at the breast more than I bottle fed because I was home with them, so I didn't have to bottle feed. But when you are bottle feeding, babies tend to go a little bit longer in between feedings because babies aren't taking what they want. They're taking what you give them, which is usually a little bit more than what they would take if they were at the breast on their own.
It's usually more.
Yeah, which is why she said 3 to 4 hours in this one.
Yeah.
Then you're watching diapers. And this is something that I think parents don't necessarily do enough of. Because if your baby has really good wet and dirty diapers, we know they're getting what they need. But we tend to still question our milk supply, and we tend to still question baby hunger cues, even though wet and dirty diapers are fine. And we still go, oh my gosh, I don't know if the baby's getting enough to eat. The baby always seems hungry. If they're having good wet and dirty diapers, they're getting what they need. So we don't need to worry about that. Same with weight gain. If they're gaining weight, they're getting what they need. And we shouldn't worry that they're going to the breast too much or too little if their diaper output is good and their weight gain is good. So it is really important to kind of watch all of that stuff. And then hopefully as time goes on and you're seeing the good wet and dirty diapers and you're seeing weight gain and you're learning your baby a little bit more, you're going to feel a little bit more confident with it. But I know in the beginning that can be really hard. It can be really, really hard to feel confident in what your baby's doing in those first couple weeks because you're just learning what to do, really. And that can feel really confusing.
And so is your baby. So they're fine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, they're okay.
Yeah.
Just because you feel a little confused or very confused, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely going to get it. Because you're going to start to learn them really well, but try to stay away from really concentrating on, oh my gosh, is this a feeding cue? Is this not a feeding cue? Because they do cues for different reasons all the time. And it really is confusing if that's the only thing you're looking at. So try to watch what your baby is doing, and that will help you to kind of tell a little bit easier, like if their baby's hungry or if they're not hungry. Well, that's kind of it. I mean, I don't know if this was helpful. I really hope it is in some way, shape, or form. But it can feel a little bit confusing. But as you're doing it, it's going to get easier. I promise.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a hard thing. But you'll get it. You're going to get it.
Mm-hmm. You will.
Thanks for listening.
For sure. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.